Hello and welcome. Ukrainian side is suffering a series of setbacks while they also have some minor successes, and the story about the amphibious crossing of the Dnipro is getting more or less comical in the last few hours. This and more in the situation report. The Russians continue attacking here at Snikivka. I cannot confirm any successes. We have Voenko, a pro-Russian military blogger here, writing about their offensive east of it. We see Snikivka here. The interesting part is that on their map, on their claims, their success is actually smaller than what we see here on the pro-Ukrainian map, which would probably see the front line further south. All in all, the supposed successes of 11 kilometer width and 3 kilometer depths are nowhere to be found. They aren't proven. We know that the Russians attacked there. It's likely that they made some successes. I read that the Ukrainians are worried in this regard, but there is no breakthrough. There is no success in depth anywhere being reported as of now in a serious way, at least that can be confirmed. We have Russian attacks south of Novoselivske. The Ukrainians themselves supposedly attacked Novoselivske and Novoihorivka. They have achieved some successes in the direction of Karmasinivka in the last 24 to 48 hours. Further south, the Russians were attacking in the direction of Torske, while the Ukrainians were attacking here in the direction of Shutlivka. Yampolivka, from Yampolivka, Torske, and in the Serebryanske forest. So overall, I can confirm some minor successes in the direction of Karmasinivka and likely successes of the Russians along this line, but not confirmed. But that's more or less it. The front line doesn't move too far here. The Russians were attacking at Bilohorivka. No change in territory being confirmed here. And we have reports about Ukrainian attacks at Berhivka, Klishivka, and Andrivka. The Russians themselves counterattacked at Kurdyumivka and at Klishivka. I have a report here from a Ukrainian military blogger who is saying that in Klishivka the situation is getting worse. The Russians were able, as you can see here, were able to recapture some territory that is inside of town, and the same is being said at Berhivka. Here, at Berhivka, the Russians also gained some ground in this area. So in both regards, the Ukrainians were likely pushed back. We see pro-Ukrainian side claiming it. I've just seen recent claims that supposedly the Russians were successful massively here along the canal. I have no confirmation whatsoever about this. I didn't even find it in any of the more serious Russian mill bloggers. So as of now, it's just rumors, completely unfounded. Around Avdiivka, we have continued attacks by the Russians. And the Russians are also attacking in the direction of Krasnohorivka. And here we actually see them having some success. We see, by the way, an interesting video here of a Ukrainian FPV drone. You see the RPG-7 warhead, and the video doesn't play right now, but doesn't really matter. It was geolocated to strike here. Now, this is interesting because what we see here, this here is the mine that the Russians recently reached. And if we look on the map, this is north of it, so more or less up here, which would mean that the Russians advance along that tree line closer to Krasnohorivka. They haven't reached it yet, and we just saw that they were struck there. That doesn't mean they control the area, but it shows that the Russians were pushing in this direction, and at least with some temporary successes here as well. Further south at Vuhledar, the Russians report a Ukrainian attack in the direction of Mikilske. No success being reported here. And at the Oblast border, we have Vorgonzo saying that the Ukrainians were somewhat successful in Uroshaine. And again, Ukrainian military blogger here having geolocated it inside of central Uroshaine Ukrainian presence. So at least according to the geolocations, the Ukrainians crossed over half of Uroshaine. That should be, I think, here. There's still houses further south, but that would mean they have reached 2/3 of Uroshaine as of now. Further west, we go to the Orechiv area. Vorgonzo was said that Russian positions were moved, but by the Ukrainians, so the Ukrainians advanced somewhat. The Ukrainians are pushing them back, but Vorgonzo claims that the Ukrainians were not able to hold their positions. I've made an interview on my German channel with a German volunteer, and he mentioned that taking a position isn't even the difficult thing, it's holding it, because the Russians exactly know where their positions are and then start shelling it. And it seems to be one of those examples where they push the Russians out of a position, but then we're not able to take it to settle down themselves, at least if we want to believe Vorgonzo here. Vorgonzo is interestingly enough saying about this area, both sides are fighting for the initiative, which would indicate that, at least according to Vorgonzo, which is pro-Russian military blogger, it's no longer one-sided here when it comes to the potential for further attacks. And we have Riba here, which shows us some Ukrainian successes. We see here east of Robotine, and according to them, the northeastern part of Robotine is still contested. So according to that, the Ukrainians would still keep up pressure on the northeast of Robotine. So likely in this regard, the Ukrainians have advanced somewhat in this area here, but again, no real breakthrough of any kind. We have a video from the attack here over the Dnipro, which is getting somewhat almost comical. After this, we see it's a Czech multiple launch rocket system that is striking it here. So this was in connection with the Ukrainian river crossing there that we talked about yesterday. You see the rockets, the rockets hitting here, and there is some weird things. So the Russians do not even talk about it anymore since yesterday, roughly 24 hours ago. Then they claimed that they had defeated the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians were withdrawing. All is over. Now, here, Major Tomov is missing. He's a Russian, and the Ukrainians are claiming that they ambushed his unit, 25 men, and either killed everyone or captured. There are some images as proof. We see AK-12 here, Russian uniforms, etc., presented by the Ukrainians. This is supposedly showing prisoners of war. And now it's getting even more funnier, because we have some claims that the Ukrainians not only continue to be there, but that they actually advanced further south. I've seen a couple of pro-Ukrainian claims in this regard. This would be down here. So in total, we would talk about an advance of 10 kilometers after an initial claim that 50 Ukrainian soldiers had landed there. This is absolutely ridiculous. I don't see any proof whatsoever. To me, this is pure fantasy by some pro-Ukrainian accounts. I have no idea what they're even thinking about saying things like this. But to advance to a depth like this, they would have to have landed 3,000-4,000 men by now. This is absolutely ridiculous. I said, I can't possibly understand. In my understanding, I would say from everything I know so far, the Ukrainians landed there, had a couple of successful skirmishes, probably took some prisoners, probably took some losses as well, and then withdrew. I do not see any realistic chance that as of now there is an existing Ukrainian bridgehead that is being extended. I mean, I might learn that I was wrong in this regard, but anything I find right now does not indicate to that anything serious. In my mind, the Ukrainians have left the left bank of the Dnipro clearly as they are already gone. We have, when we talk about the general situation, we have Russian military bloggers basically confirming what I said in the past, that the attacks here in the north of Luhansk, those attacks here are all not nearly meant to capture territory, but that their goal is to fix Ukrainian troops in place, as clearly the Ukrainians have sent reinforcements here, for instance, to the Sherebets bridgehead to push it back in to prevent the Russians getting closer to the Oskil here, and those reserves can now no longer be used at another part of the front line. So the Russians have clearly been successful here in this regard. Overall, the situation is fairly static. It can be discussed what the reason for this is, but the Ukrainians clearly seem to be a significant part away from any deeper breakthrough. The offensive will likely continue for several weeks and months. We had, for instance, Michael Kaufman saying the same thing, that who is a renowned expert on this, that the fighting will continue over the next few weeks and months. There is no sign that the Russians are about to crack anyways, and the Ukrainians now seem to be bound to lure out Russian artillery to destroy it with counter-battery fire, but I do not see any serious attempts with big forces anymore to push through. When we talk about the troop generation, we have some information here. According to the Moscow Times, they were talking about storage facilities by the Russians, and Vakshanovo, which is in Ulan-Ude, the facility of Vakshanovo has lost 40% of its inventory in the last year, and now they are missing. There are missing 2,270 items. They did not say exclusively tanks, even though the talk is about T-62 tanks as well. But according to them, out of, out of 3,840, now there are 2,600 left. No, my mistake. And now there are 2,270 left, so 1,570 were missing from here, and we see the numbers here. It was asked then on the people were trying to identify it, and we found some pictures here where you can see how the amount of vehicles change over time. We see, especially here, for instance, in June there is nothing left in this area, and in several parts it has become less, and it's the same with several other depots. For instance, it's completely empty here already. Others get thinner, the amount of items in there, and the same is here. We see that the Russian reserves are getting smaller, but at the same time we have to say that they are still fairly well in existence. While there is a lot less here, there's still something left, and other depots still are full. I've talked about this in the past. This is obviously a huge advantage for the Russians, but at the same time, it has to be said that the number of items will go down when it comes to arriving on the front line, or at least it should be at best stable, as usually they would take out the easiest to repair items out of a depot initially. So any tank that's left now in the depot will need a lot more work than a tank that was pulled out of storage a year ago. This, in the other hand, is good news for Ukraine, but overall it's obviously not the greatest thing for Ukraine. I have some political news as well. Kadyrov, there are reports that Kadyrov is forcefully mobilizing members of families of opposition opposition persons. So basically he wants to punish anybody who is against him by taking his family and sending it to the front line. And we have news from Poland that the Polish government is sending 2,000 soldiers to the front line to guard the front line. There was talk in the past about the Wagner mercenaries in Belarusia, whether they could be a threat to Poland. Now there are rumors that Wagner is leaving Belarusia, partially for vacation in Russia, partially for Syria. I read the rumors, but there is no proof whatsoever that anything of this is true. So far, there's no visible evidence, no visual evidence that Wagner is currently leaving Belarusia. And from Germany, we have news that a spy was caught in the Federal Office for Equipment, Information, Rearmament, Informational Technique and Usage by the German Army. He was arrested for being a spy for the Russians, and apparently he wrote to the Russian, he approached the Russian embassy and the consulate and gave them informations, and he was now caught. International support is coming for Ukraine as well, and this was supposed to be this year. 50 Leopard 2 tanks that were in storage in a Belgium facility owned by a Belgian arms dealer company were bought by Rheinmetall. They are being transferred to Rheinmetall now and being refurbished, basically to be made ready to be put back into service, aimed at Ukraine. So 50 additional Leopard 1 tanks are on the horizon for Ukraine. We have an example here where how the Ukrainian side is trying to address the mine problem. This is a remotely controlled tractor where we clearly see mine rollers. The issue here, though, is that this is unarmored, and this will not be used along the front line. I can't possibly imagine this being used without any armor. It's far too easy to take it out. This will likely be used in the rear areas or in the liberated areas of Ukraine, where they try to make sure that the mining problem becomes smaller. And we have two news about problems in Russia. A military here reported fired a military unit at Georgievsk is in Stavropol Krai is on fire. As we can see here, we see ARVs in the front of the building, and the house is burning. And here we have the news that in a optical and mechanical plant near Moscow, a huge explosion happened. As you can see, the smoke cloud is quite extensive. Obviously, we don't know what's the reason for this yet. Any news here is unclear, but it's obvious that the amount of factories in Russia that catch fire and blow up seems to have increased since the beginning of the war. That was already it for me for now. Not too much happening along the front line, so I'm not going to extend it needlessly if we don't have much to talk about. If you enjoyed this situation report, please hit the thumbs up button. Leave a comment for the algorithm. What do you think about the Ukrainian counteroffensive? Do you think it will be able to gain steam, or can we already say that it is a failure? If you're new here, I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss future videos. This channel is only possible because of the support of viewers like you. If you like to support the channel, you can do so by the means in the description. Thank you very much to everyone already supporting this channel. That's it from me for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back.